Hi everyone, thanks for tuning into my channel. So I've got a new video now, so this is episode 3 of the RPG from Scratch series, and this one here I'm going to go over implementing some of the game mechanics into our little test scene that we've got there. Just wanted to get started on this. Just wanted to give you guys something else to go on with. I am going to get started on the quest thing I think in the next episode. I'll actually be implementing the quest system there so you can see how that works. But for now, this is actually one that's built in that you can make with just the template. You don't actually need the quest system for it. And it was just something pretty cool that I found I was able to tailor out of what's available in the template. So I've just come up here with a really basic guide for writing up a game mechanic. So as I was discussing in one of the earlier videos, with your game mechanics, you've got you need to figure out whether you are basing a game around a game mechanic or whether you are making a game mechanic that will help tell the story that you're trying to put together or help with your artwork. So the way I've laid this one out here is it's in the idea that it's helping out with the artwork. So of course I've got the title there, which is story excerpt, and I've got the subheading here for outline of mechanics. So this is just basically where you write down the basic overview of what your mechanic is and what it's supposed to do. So with my story excerpt, I've basically got it's going to be a descriptive passage pop-up, which is giving context to the surrounding areas or the quest or scenario segment. So this is just basically, I just want to be able to explain a bit of the story via written text on the screen, and I want that to pop up in a way that's not not going to look out of place. So I'm shuffling my chair. So not look out of place in the game world. Now I've got the implementation into controller. So this is how I'm actually going to implement the mechanic into the world, or in this case the controller. And I don't mean as in like your actual Xbox controller. I'm talking about the player controller, but also just your game in general. So I'm saying here there's going to be a centralised window with text and a continue button appearing on the screen, barring progression of character movement until notice accepted. So what I'm sort of outlining here is we've already outlined what it's supposed to do or what we're trying to achieve. Now we're talking about how we're going to achieve it. So it's basically the method of how it's going to work. So what I'm basically saying is I want a window to pop up in the centre of the screen. It'll have the text on it so the player can read through, but I also want to be able to pause the player being able to do anything so they have the time to read what's on the screen, because it's the whole, as I'll get onto in just a minute, there's a reason why I want the player to be reading it. So I'll get into that now. There's the value add to the game. So I've thrown this subheader in here because this is basically explaining why you need the mechanic in the game. As I've said in one of the previous ones, you might come up with a mechanic that sounds cool, but in the end it's actually not really needed for your game and you'll just waste time on it. So you need to sort of figure out whether it's really necessary for you to get across the game that you're trying to get across. So this little section here helps you write up the reason why you want this in your game. So I'm putting here is using text to explain events rather than needing art or audio assets I've actually written it a little bit funny there, but I'm basically talking about it's going to reduce the game size because audio assets themselves will have a bigger file size as compared to a bit of text that pops up on the screen. But it'll still maintain the immersion and the understanding to enhance the flow of gameplay. So it's all about actually setting up the flow of gameplay. So instead of having to walk into an area and listen for sound cues, maybe listen for some dialogue or listen for something, you'll basically walk into the area and you'll get a description as you would in like an old tabletop D&D adventure. So that's the idea of how it's going to work. Now I've actually already implemented this into the test scene, so I'm going to bring that up now. And I've also got the controller plugged in this time, so I'm going to show you, this is actually built in with the template, the Invector template. It's already got the controls for an Xbox controller built in, and I think even the PlayStation controller if you've got that working. Anyway, so as you can see, I've got a little bit more to the test scene now. I've put in a few bits and pieces, and I've also put in these fluffy looking things. So you've got your little particle effects there going off, and they're my indicators for here's a story event. So if I just jump on here, so you can see what's happened now is that it's popped up with a text box, like I said, and it's got some text in it, and then a continue button. And when I move the mouse, I can actually scroll around and have a look at that. I haven't implemented controls for the controller to press the continue button, but I'll do that at a later stage. But as you can see, my player can't actually move around. I'm trying to push him around now, but he can't, but I can move the camera. And then we click on continue, and now I've got my control back. So now I can move around. So I'll climb up here, and there we go. So we've got a little bit on the controller going on. And we've got this little room in here. So the way it would work in an actual, more of a contextual sense. So we walk in here, so you hear the raucous noises of cheering and celebration over the bleating noises of a local bard strumming along on his lute. A little bit of poor grammar and poor writing, but it was just something I was doing quick as a demonstration. So click on continue, and now we can enter into here. So as you can see, the gameplay stopped for a moment there. The only difference is that I've only stopped the player's ability to move around. I haven't actually stopped the game world from continuing on. So there could be some issues with this a little bit later on where you might be wanting to stop a player from entering an area and get a description of it first, but a monster in that area might see them and start attacking them, and then they could die before they get to do anything. So we'll look at ways of in the future, we'll look at ways of actually stopping the entire game, so the whole game pauses until you continue on. But for now, we just got to stop the controller. As you can see, we've gone in here, we've got a few other people, they're sitting at a table, they're all animated. Some are talking, some are doing funny arm movements, and then we've got a bard playing a guitar. Of course, I don't have any sound yet. I haven't actually got any sound assets. I realised when I was putting together the asset packs of the game, I don't think I added in any sound packs. There are some free music packs and free sound kits with some basic human noises, which we'll look at later on. But at the moment, I usually do with sound as one of the later things. I do have the Fizz sound package that we'll be implementing. That comes with a few sounds. But yeah, we'll go over all the sound and the audio engineering a little bit later on. It's not something that I see as a necessity right away. We can jump up in here. We've got a king and a queen and a governor's daughter, as it is. Yeah, so anyway, so I'll show you how to actually build this from the scene up from where I started. So we'll just pause that. So yeah, as you can see here, here's my test scene. Now we've got the building in the centre, we've got the characters that we've put in place. Now they've all got controllers on them to control their animation, which is sitting down. And then we've got all the props in there as well. And here are the story modes. So what we'll do first is I'll show you how to actually build this scene from scratch. Now if you're new to Unity and you haven't dealt with sort of 3D world building stuff before, so keep watching. If you have already, if you're well aware of how to manipulate 3D objects in space and deal with colliders, things like that, feel free to sort of skip ahead. I will put it in the description the time for when you can skip ahead to in the video when I figure it out when it uploads. But for now, so we want to look at building this. So we're going to leave all that stuff there, and we're just going to start again from scratch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Art Resources, going to go to what did I use for this? Oh, didn't want the tutorial canvas. So we've got a floor. So we have to select that. So I'm just going to select where that was. So as you can see, I've got my asset in here for the floor. So I'm going to drag that in and just pop it there. This is where we're going to start building our new house and our new little bit of story. So as you can see on this thing, it's got an animator with it. We don't actually need that because it is just going to be a static object. So I'm going to remove that component. I'm also going to click static and apply. And that should, what happens there is when I click apply, that actually updates the prefab that's sitting in the folders in here. So now whenever I click that, it's going to show the same as what's on here. So that's fine, we've got that. One of the things you'll need when you're dealing with 3D objects, especially in this game, because we are dealing with a physics controller, we need to add the colliders, so the game knows where the bounds of the 3D object is. Now, there's several ways you can do that, depending on what kind of pieces you've got. Now, this piece here, it looks like it's just a solid rectangle, so you could get away with just adding in a box collider, so we can just type in BOX, and we've got a box collider, and that'll create us that little rectangular the prism there that will cover over that. But if you actually look a little bit closer with this, I'm going to take that off. When you have a look closer, you can see that it's actually shaved off on the edges. There's little corners in, so it's not just a regular rectangular prism, it's actually got some edges on it. So what you can do is you can actually use a mesh collider, and it will take the mesh that's in this section here, so this object's just here, and it will look at the geometry of that and build a collider for each of the faces that are on there. So it can be a little bit more of a draw on your resources. You won't want to have it on everything. You want to try and minimise the geometry as much as you can, just so it doesn't eat up quite as much. But anyway, you want to make sure that that's on this because we are using a controller that has physics-based stuff, so it's going to interact with that object. And if you want it to walk up slightly higher in areas, or as I said later, we're going to put the fizz sound on the object, so when they drop on certain sides at certain angles, it's going to give them a different sound. So we want that to actually play a part, and we want it to try and be as real as we can with, we want it to be as one-to-one as we can with the actual landscape. So anyway, that all being said, so we've got our floor. We actually want to make a couple of these. So I'm just going to, instead of actually, no, you know what, we'll just extend it out. So we'll use the one, and we'll just stretch it this way, and we'll stretch it out this way a little bit. So it's a little bit bigger, and as you can see now, it's a lot more pronounced. So you can see it's definitely not, just a perfect rectangle. It's got parts that stick out. So yeah, we want the mesh collider to make sure that we cover everything on that, so you're not just disappearing through it halfway. And I'm actually getting a little bit of drawback. It's trying to do the lighting. So what's going to happen is, as you can see here, it's building the light, the lighting for the scene down the bottom. That can give you a lot of grief when you're trying to do things, because as soon as you adjust something, it tries changing it again. As you can see there, it's there. The way you can get around that to stop it from doing that is you can come down to window, lighting, and then settings, and then just down the bottom here you've got auto generate. I'll just move that up in case it's cut off. So you've got auto generate, just turn that off, and that way it's whenever you change something, it's not going to do anything with the lighting down here, and you shouldn't get any kind of frame rate issues or anything like that. So anyway, so this is our little place here. Now we want to get a wall. I'm just going to select that, and I'll show you. So this wall was actually in the Dungeons and Caves props pack that I've downloaded. These ones here, I think with the other ones, they don't come with their own colliders. Sometimes some of them do, some of them don't. Just depends on the pack that you get in the end. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab that, and we're just going to rotate that around, just so we get a nice little rotation. Just 90, yeah, that'll do. And we're going to mark this. When I actually do an episode about building the world, I go into a bit more depth, and we might even use another program to help build the map out in a proper way. So I've got like the snapping of objects, things like that. Now I'm going to duplicate that by just Control D. I'm going to get rid of that. So as you can see, I've got wall 1 here, which is this original wall, and then wall 1 copy, which is this one here, and then we can just sort of move that across till we get it to a spot where we like. So that there looks alright. Now what I like doing here as well is because I'm going to have so many things in the scene, so we've got the floor, we've got the 2 walls, I'm actually just going to create, I'm going to go on the floor and I'm going to create an empty. So now I've got a game object that's sitting here at the 0 marker, so the central point of the floor, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag that up here. So now the game object's been given an XYZ coordinate for the 3D world that it's in, so that's central to where it is there. So now I'm going to just rename, I'm going to press F2 to rename, and just call this building 2, not building 1, building 2. And then I'm actually going to drag these prefabs onto that one there, so then they become children of that. So now whenever I move building 2 around, it's going to move everything. And then I can just adjust these as well. Now just for making it a little bit tidier, I'm going to stretch that out a little bit more. It's probably a bit too much. Yeah, a little bit too much. Shrink that down a little bit more. Alright, that'll do for now. It could be fixed up a little bit better, but that's alright. So what we're going to do is we're going to have this little wall here, and we're going to have a little section of floor. We're going to also grab some of this, so I'm going to pop that one there. And this one here has a mesh collider on it, because as you can see, again, so I'll go back onto this for the wall. So the wall here, obviously, I've put on a box collider, because as you can see, it's pretty much a box. Now you've got this little gap here where, this little space here, where the brickwork at the top and at the bottom as well pops out from the main wall. But I figured that with the wall, as much as I'm going to be playing with it, it's pretty much just going to have to be one solid block. So I can reduce a little bit there of the colliders, and hopefully that'll buy me a little bit of resources later. But this one here, I had to go with a mesh collider just because it has got a lot of overhang, and when you're on a certain corner, so like that, you don't really want the box to be coming out all the way out here. In case you're going to shoot something, you'll have like a few inches there where you won't be able to shoot through. It's just going to collide with the wall. So I've gone with a mesh one for the columns there. So we've got that. I'm going to drag that one again into our building prefab, so that's now part of the second building. Also going to Control D, and we're just going to drag one out, so we go to this side here. Oh, and as you can see, we can see through it a little bit, so we'll bring it back in. And there we go. So now we've got a wall and a little bit of flooring there. I'm not going to make a full building like this because, as I said, I'll do that properly in a world building one, but I'll just show you how to set this sort of stuff up so you can have something fun here. Now, I want to maybe dress that up, put a little bit of cool stuff on it. So let's go to building 2. What have we got here? Down the side. Rocks, planks, ooh, vegetation. What have we got? So there's grass. Am I in the right? Yeah, Dungeons Caves. I thought there were vines or something in this. Maybe ropes. Oh, liana root. There we go. That's what that is. So as you can see, I can drag this in, and I've got some pretty funky looking, very large though, plant stuff. So we're going to bring that down a little bit. Of course, we'll also drop it down in the scene. Excuse me. There's my liana root. And so now you can see there's a little bit of grass work on there. We're going to want to put that in the building as well, so it's all part of the building. I'm not going to use any kind of collider with this one, so it's got, it actually seems to have an animator on it. I've never seen that before. We'll see what that looks like in a minute. It might sort of blow around in the wind or something. Actually, let's have a look at that now. Let's see what that does. So as you can see, the lighting on this, because I've turned off the auto generator and put things in, the light level's going to drop down. It's not going to render it properly. But as you can see, it's sort of playing around. There's no collider, so running into it's not going to do anything. But it is sort of hanging. So that might be better not on the wall. We can take off that animator so it stays still. But you could have that, say, at the hanging from the doorway there. If you're going into like an old crypt or something, you'll have the rope-like grass dangling down and sort of swaying in the breeze, which is pretty cool. That's going to be annoying me now. Alright, so I'm going to turn back on the lighting. So just going to click generate lighting. It's going to go through and generate that lighting. And should hopefully bring us back a little bit of stuff. Oh, I don't want to do that. That's fine. What else can we make to make this look a little good? Yeah, this one here, for some reason, it has brought it in. Yeah, it's just not showing up properly down here, so I don't know what's going on with that. Columns, ground. You know what, let's put on a little bit of carpet. So we've got a little carpet there. And we want to put that on. That's fine. Get in there. And what's this elevator? Oh, that's pretty cool. So you know what? Let's turn that one upside down. Ooh. That's really weird that it's just come in on that strange angle. Don't know why that is, but you know what? We're just going. Oh, okay, I see. Because it's an amalgamation of stuff. So we're going from the centre. We don't want to do it. We go from the pivot. Maybe. No, it doesn't matter. Alright, we're not putting that in it. We'll deal with that one later. So here we've got a few other things. We've got chairs. We've got a guillotine. That actually might be pretty fun. Let's try throwing that one in there. We'll put that there now. As you can see, if we click on that, it has got an animator, but there's no actual animation for it, so we're just going to remove that. That's fine. Now we want to make this as a physics object because it is a large object in the game, so we obviously want to be able to run into it and not make it look silly, but we're going to go with the mesh one for that one because, again, like the box, there's a lot of open space that would be covered up by the box collider and you wouldn't be able to shoot through it. So now that we've got the mesh collider, the player can collide with the actual mesh in that there. Then we might have, say, a spiderweb. Looks like it'll be fun. So yeah, the spider web, obviously we don't need to, oh, it actually has a mesh collider, there you go. We want to actually take that off, so I'm going to go remove that component and just apply to that one. Because I want players to actually be able to move in and out of the spider web, so I don't want them to be able to walk up the side of the wall because there's a big spider web there. But we're going to add that onto there. We're also going to add the guillotine to that building prefab just to keep things a bit tidier. And that's alright for that now. What we'll do next is we will put in a character and I'll show you how to animate that. So we're going to pick a character from, we'll go, what have we got here in the fancy looking ones? We've got a druid, we have a gypsy, female peasant, queen, witch, bird, king. You know what, we'll put this rogue in there. As you can see, he's just going to stand in there and he's already got an animator set up on him. We are going to turn him around to the way that we want him to turn around to, and we're going to have to assign him with a controller. So, what I've done with that now, did I put it in modified? Yep, animated controllers. So, like I was saying in one of the previous videos, I've got this modified resources folder, so I can keep that folder, and whenever I try and update something else, it hopefully won't write over the top of anything. So I'm going here to the animated controllers. I don't know why materials are there. I think that was an error. And I've created animated controllers for each of the avatars that are inside there. So I've given them all different names. And I can use these again when I want to repeat those sorts of animations in other areas. But for now, I'm going to create a new one. So I'm just going to go here, right click, create, and then we're going to go animated controller. And we're going to call this one executioner. So you want the executioner to be this guy here. So we're going to click on him, we're going to give him this controller, and I'm just going to double click this and it's going to bring up the animated controller panel. Now we can add in an animation state. Because I'm dealing with this guy here, he's just going to have the one idle animation. He's not going to be going and doing anything crazy, he's just going to be standing there. But I want him animated so he doesn't look like he's a statue. So we come here and we go create state, and we create empty, and as you can see it's going to add us a transition line here from basically when the game starts into the first state that we've got. And we're just going to call this one idle, and I'm going to hit tab and it'll change that name to there. Now for the animations, I don't believe I actually brought in any extra animations in the previous videos, but what I have done since then is I've actually, if I go to here, I have added in a few animations which I brought through from Mixamo's website. So yeah, if we go here, we've got Mixamo animations. So I've uploaded one of the characters that I've had to the website, so you can see it looks a bit weird because it's an amalgamation of all the different characters there. But as you can see, it's going to not play that animation because that's the wrong one. But here you can see that he's going to nod. So I can now take that animation and pop that into my scene in my controller. But what I want to actually have is something that works a little bit better, of someone that we can have looping. So what's this cheering look like? Hooray! Have a drunk idol. Yep, you know what, let's go with that one. So I'm going to click drunk idol here. As you can see, it's got all the different character meshes pushed into that, but I just want that one. So I'm going to click on this idle state here, and as you can see, there's the motion field here where I can add an animation. So as we looked before, when we click on that, we can see that this is the one we want to play. I am going to edit it though, because as you can see, it's got the little setup here, and I need to click loop time. So this way it's just going to constantly loop through the whole thing. And it should, no, it doesn't have anything. So now we've got to click apply, and that's changed it now, so it's a looping animation. So it will constantly loop through until you tell it to stop. But we don't need to tell it to stop, so I'm just going to pop that in there. When you download them from Mixamo, you realise it's going to have the mixamo.com for each of the animations, so they won't be named. So when you go here and you click here, you can see I've got a whole load of the same name, and I just have to figure out where they are by clicking on them and seeing that it says guitar playing one. So yeah, not ideal, but if you've got your own animation packs, they'll all be named separately and they'll be a little bit cleaner. But this was just a bunch that I had for demonstration purposes for the video. So now we've got that one there. When we go into scene, if we play the game now... Oh, what's happened here? So he's got the guitar playing one on. Okay, I think I've accidentally clicked on something I shouldn't have. What do we have? Yeah, see, I've accidentally selected and highlighted the guitar playing one from before. Not what I meant to have done. We want the drunk. If we go up, here it is. So we're going to place that one in instead, and hopefully that's changed, but I can't tell. Oh, so as you can see here, we've got an issue where the skeleton for the animation doesn't match up with the skeleton that comes through for this avatar. So what we need to do is, as you can see here, we've got this. So drunk idle. To fix this, hopefully we can fix it. We need to go to rig. So here we've got here set to generic, create from this model, and none. What we want to do is actually change this, copy from another avatar. We want to open this up, and we need to have our fantasy characters. So I'm going to type in characters. Okay, yep. So I'm going to do that again. So what you need to do is actually change it from generic. So it was in generic before. You need to change it to humanoid already, and then change it to copy from another avatar. Open up the source, and we want to find that characters that we need. Just typed. Polygon fantasy characters, because that's the one that we're using the rogue from, so we're just best off choosing that one. I'm pretty sure most of their avatars are actually the same throughout, so they should be able to work with any other packs. But it's always good, if you're going to use it for that one, use it, pick that specific skeleton or that avatar, and just click apply, and hopefully we get no errors. Yep, so that's perfectly fine. Sometimes you might get an error where it's tried to find a hip bone and it won't work properly. It might just be that the data on it's a little bit corrupt, so you have to either re-import that animation or just come up with another animation. I don't really have a fix for that directly, so that's just sort of how I've been dealing with it. But as you can see, everything's still as it is. It's going to loop, so now when we play the game, we can run through and you can see he's sort of standing there a little bit drunk. And we can walk through the spider web without walking up the wall. And we can't walk through here. Although we can try and roll, let's see what we do. Oh, okay, cool. Anyway, so his animation should be looping. Why is that not looping? Let's have a look. So we have drunk idle, we have Mixamo. We're going to edit that. Oh, somehow it stopped him looping, so I must have looped the wrong one. That's fine. Click apply, and that's all done. And when we do it, you can see he's making a little bit of wobbly. And you should just keep doing that sort of thing. Ooh, alright. But as you can see, we can also move through him. Now if I come through this part here, got a little story, you can see I can't move through this guy because I've actually put a collider on him. Now, when you're dealing with NPCs through the template, they'll actually come with their own physics colliders, and you can turn on the ragdoll effect, all that sort of stuff. So you won't need to worry about manually putting in a collider for them. But because these guys are stationary and they're not actually going to be AI controlled characters within the game that I can hit with the sword and actually hurt. Although you can change that later on. I need to put on the colliders manually, so I'll show you how to do that with this guy over here. As soon as I can close the window, that's fine. Oh, I'm in game mode. So you can see we've got our gentleman here now. He is character male rogue. I'm actually going to put him inside the building too, so that we, again, just keeping them all tidy. And we're going to go here and add a capsule collider. You can add box, you can add cylinder, or even a sphere if you really want. Just depends on the shape. Usually for humanoid targets, you go with a capsule collider for many different reasons. But we do that. We're just going to drag that up here. And we're just going to zoom around to make sure that the circle is pretty good for where he is. So he's got his arms sticking out now, but remember when he actually starts playing his animation, his arms are tucked in on the side and he jolts forward a little bit. So we've given him enough room that we're not really going to collide with him unless we really try hard enough. So yeah, so we can do that now. He's got that on there. Just going to take that off. We're not going to apply anything here because, again, this is the prefab, or the basic prefab. If I wanted to save this whole building here as a prefab, I can put that into the modified folder, and then any changes I make will change through to just that prefab. But right now we've got him fine as he is. So now, as you can see, we've got in the game our guys running around, and we can now not walk into this guy. We can also try and swing our sword, but hit a bunch of things and stop ourselves. So we can deal with that. That's all fine. So what we want to do now is we actually want to be able to say, a player will come up to this and go, well, what's going on here? We want to tell him a little bit of a story. Now, the way I've done that by using the template is I've actually used the tutorial canvas and the tutorial trigger, which you can find in the actual demo scene for the shooter template, or even the melee template also has it. Where I've done that is if I go to modified, you can see here all I've done is I've opened up that demo scene, and I have dragged from the hierarchy, I've dragged the tutorial canvas into this folder and created a prefab for it, and I've done the same thing with the tutorial trigger. So as you can see here, it's called story trigger. What I might do is, have I got it in this thing? Yep, story trigger. I'm actually going to create a prefab of that as well, so that I don't go over that, and for this purpose I'll be able to drag it straight in. So what you'll need to do is you'll need to drag the tutorial canvas into your scene, and as you can see it's in this one here. If we highlight it in the hierarchy, hover over the scene window and then hit F, and you'll see it'll pop us out to where it is. Now it's invisible at the moment because it's normally switched to off, so you can see it's active here. Panel 1 is active, but it's see-through, there's no actual rendering for it. But then this panel here is hidden, so if we actually tick the active option here, you'll see it's come up with this this imagery here. So what it come up with normally is it's just sort of a half sort of see-through plain background, but you've got your own images, so you can pretty much adjust this whole section here. You can adjust the image that's inside, which will be the background for the text. As you can see here, I've got the highlight box, so all my text will fit in there. When I click on this one, I can change the background of the button and then the text on the button. And then here we've got the text, which is actually the tutorial box info, so it's this text that sits inside. And if we highlight this one here for editing in 2D and Canvas, you can see the outlines of the text box. So all the text will fit inside this box and follow what's written on here. So, you know what, we're going to change it to Reckoner. No, I don't like Reckoner. Let's go. Yeah, that one will do, that's fine. So this is how you set up your thing. So every time you go over one of those story triggers, it will pop this, set this panel to active, so from inactive to active, and then it will change the text in the tutorial box section, text info here. It will fill that out automatically according to what you have on the trigger script, which I'll show you shortly. So that's how you set that up in the scene. Now we obviously make sure that we have this unticked at the start. So we come back through, tutorial canvas, that can be active, but everything else is inactive. And it will get switched on. Excuse me. It'll get switched on by the story trigger text script. So that's all set up fine the way we want it. You can move that around to wherever you like it, wherever it's aesthetically pleasing for you. Now what I've actually done here, sorry, this won't be in the tutorial canvas because it's I've added it in, sorry, I forgot to mention that. So the button here, this button I've actually created myself. Previously in the tutorial one, the tutorial canvas you have in the demo, the demonstration for the template, is triggered by colliding with the collider for the trigger, or colliding with the trigger, but once you leave it will then deactivate the box again. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be able to have the player not just run straight through something and then get rid of it. I wanted them to be able to actually read it, like stop, take time to read it, and then hit the button to say they want to continue on. So I needed to actually add a button to that one there and add the button script. So as you can see, it's got an image for the button. All you do is basically on the panel you can just right click UI and then button, and it will create this already with the button with text inside it. So on the button, I've set up the background image for the button, I've set the size of the button, I've set the text on the inside just to say continue, that's fine. And then down here is where we've got the important stuff. So on click. So what this is saying is this is bringing up the events. So it's saying run this event when this happens. So whenever you've clicked this button, I want it to go, if the game is running, I want it to find the Xamon Prefab 1, which I've actually dragged from the hierarchy, so not the prefab that's in the assets folder, but the actual one that's in the hierarchy and going, because of the way this template works, you can pretty much keep that one prefab in there and it will go across multiple scenes. We're only really dealing with one scene for this thing anyway, but as I was saying, so we want to, all you do is just drag that prefab into this little slot here, and it will pop up with this list of different scripts and components on that you can access. So what we need to do is we need to find the shooter melee input, and then we need to find lock input bool. So what that is that's actually a bool or a trigger on the character controller. So you've got the third person controller, but if you go to the shooter melee input, you can see this button here, lock input. When that's ticked, it means that it's not going to read anything from here. So it won't read any of the horizontal or vertical input or jump, any of the buttons that you've got to move around, it will lock them. The camera input will still go, and I don't believe the melee inputs do, or the shooter inputs, so you can't actually aim or punch. You can't move, but as we saw before, you can still rotate the camera around because it just follows where you click anyway. So that's how we do that. So when we chuck that on there, you can see I've got it unticked. So because it's a bool, it's basically got a yes or a no. It's either ticked or it's unticked. So to give you this option here, when I click it, I want it to be unticked, which means I want this whole thing to be... so I want the lock input to release. So what's going on there is that basically it's saying that when I want to move on, I click on that button and then I can control my character again because the lock input is turned off. It also needs to be able to hide the tutorial panel too, because what's going to happen is when I click on that button, I want that button to hide and I want to be able to control my character again, but I don't want to trigger this thing back off. So I've got it set to hide panel, which is this one here. So it knows that it needs to switch that button there to off to hide the panel again. So that's how that works with that. So what we need to do is we need to figure out a way to actually turn this panel on and fill information in that box and then stop the controller from moving around. So that's pretty much the opposite of what we're trying to do here, where we try and give the controller back to the player and hide the panel there. Now we've done that, I'm just going to flick that back off. So the way we do that is via the story trigger. So I can click on that. Actually, let's find our building. Go down here. So now I want the player to be able to actually trigger that off and set that off. So I'm going to drag this story trigger into a location that I want it to be on. So you can see here, this is where I want it to sort of sit, and we've called it story trigger, but I'm actually going to drag that down into the building just so we know that it's different. As you can see, you've got the mesh renderer and the V-rotate object scripts on here because I've used it from the tutorial trigger, which is this, but I didn't like that purple hue and the way it sort of flew around. So I've actually just, instead of deleting it, I've just turned it off in case I do want to use it a bit later on. I've just turned it off for now. So we open this up and you can see there's trigger 1, and this has a bunch of colliders on it, and these colliders are all part of to do with the triggering the generic action and the text trigger. So as you can see here in the text field, you hear the raucous noises, so that was the story trigger that we had from over here. So I just need to change that now, and we'll put in, you can see ahead, drunken executioner, barely able to stand. Business must be slow. Spacebar at the right time. So we put that one in there. Now you got the text UI and the panel. I believe they don't need to be changed. I'll just double check that. Oh no, text and panel. So yep, so we do need to change that. So the text UI, when we come here, you can see this is the text that we need to change. So as you can see from this, so I've gone into the hierarchy here for the tutorial canvas, and I've dragged this text box, which we've said before is the one where all the text will fill in. Then we need to come through here, and we also need it says panel here, it's meant to be panel, it's a typo, they'll fix that up later, which is this panel up here. So the one that's hidden, because what happens with this script is that once the trigger is triggered, it will activate the panel, so it'll turn the panel on and it will fill the text in the panel with what you've got written in here. So yeah, once you hit these colliders, that will happen, and then it's got the generic action triggered in. So if you remember, on our prefab, we've actually got a blank generic action sitting on there. So yeah, here's our V generic action script. When you open up the properties, nothing's on there. All right, it's just that's just how it is. Now that's meant to be blank because what happens is when this trigger triggers off, it will fill out all this information that it needs to and send it to that component on the player and fill up all the information there. So on do action, it's got all this stuff on player enter. Don't worry too much about any of that because it's automatically going to trigger the tutorial text trigger script. But in case you wanted it to maybe trigger off an animation or something, you can set it to change an animation. But for now, that's all we need for that one. So let's actually just demonstrate that. I'm going to click play. So as you can see now, I've got this little, the little animation from that. So you can see ahead, a drunken executioner, barely able to stand, business must be slow. But as you can see, I'm still moving around because we haven't set it up to stop me from doing that. So we click continue on that, that's fine. And then when we come here, you can see that I have actually turned it off. Now I ran a couple of extra steps just because of the speed that I was going. It takes a little second for the controller to stop. Click OK, that's fine. But what we do have as well is that this one's disappeared after you've done it, because once it triggers once, it just destroys itself. You can change that a bit later on. We can actually click here. So auto action disabled, destroy after. All you do is just click that off and it will stay there forever. So you can keep re-triggering it. I don't really want that because you only need to trigger it once and then they know the story. So I'm leaving that on. But we open events. So on do action or on player enter. This is where we need to do the same thing as before. We need to drag the prefab into here. We need to go to the function menu and find the melee input and the lock input bool, and this time we want it ticked because we want it to actually lock the input until it clicks continue. So now that we've got that set there, once we go here, we press play, and we bring that in, and you can see now that it's popped up and I can no longer move my character around, but I can move the camera a little bit. So you can see ahead, a drunken executioner, barely able to stand, business must be slow, continue. So there you go, and that's how we set up a little scene where we can have stories pop up. So that's how I've just sort of implemented that game mechanic. Now it's very quick. I also want to do like a little bit more tweaking later on where I can stop the animations. I can basically just freeze everything where it is so that there's no issue of the player being chased by a monster and getting killed because he ran into the wrong story section. But as you can see, that's how we put these things together. And there we go. So yeah, that was just a quick little demonstration of how to sort of trial out a game mechanic that you've come up with and implemented it, and how to use the built-in stuff for the Invector template to achieve that goal. On the next episode, which hopefully I'll be doing up a little bit later tonight, I'll be showing you how to implement the quest system, and we'll get a simple quest put through, and hopefully we'll be able to get that working. Anyway, thanks again for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next episode.